has joined. Thank you, Joyce, for being with us. We are just getting started here.
And we are recording. So Jeff, whenever you're ready to start, let's do it.
All right. Well, I'm going to flip back and I will share this. I know you may see it, you may not, but we're going to start on slide 1. If you have the PDF presentation that came by email, this is the Haynes Manor traffic calming meeting. We appreciate very much your time and willingness to join us tonight. This has been some time coming. This Haynes Manor neighborhood was selected for traffic calming a few months ago, and we're working through a pretty large backlog of traffic calming projects that had been awarded, but for COVID and spending freezes and one reason or another, we're still working through some of those. So we appreciate your patience very much as we try to deliver this project to you. This is a virtual meeting, and what I'm going to do is go through really 3 main sections, and we'll do this pretty quick. First section is an overview of the program, just to give you a little bit of information about it and how you all were selected. Second part of some of the more common countermeasures that we typically use when we're doing traffic calming, and then the last part, maybe the part most of interest to folks, is our preliminary plan for what we think would be the best traffic calming program for the Haynes Manor neighborhood. This is a discussion. This is kind of a first stab at that, and so we're very much open to your feedback and things. But we do like to put something in front of you and try to get some early feedback on that. All right, I'm going to move to slide 2 now. Traffic calming really has 3 different components. There's, of course, an education component, and it's hard to go the speed limit if you don't know what that is, and so there's some education piece to that. Of course, there's an enforcement component. We work very closely with MNPD, but as you all probably know, their officers are just really stretched in terms of prioritization of a lot of very important work that department does, and so we would love it if they could park a cruiser out more often and write tickets and all of those things, but the reality is they just don't have a lot of time to do that. And so that gets us largely to the third component, which is where we step in at the Department of Transportation, which is the engineering part. And sometimes that's done in new road construction with different types of road layouts and things, but what we deal with in this program is retrofits. So we're going into neighborhoods that have been established very often for a very long time, and but they have since seen some traffic problems, generally in the form of speeding, and so we're here to try to retrofit and put some devices out that mitigate that problem. That's where the term traffic calming comes into play. Slide 3. What is traffic calming? In our program here in Nashville, we focus this on residential streets, and most programs around the country do that. These are often physical solutions. There might be 1 or 2 educational type of countermeasures that we'll look at, but for the most part, what we find to be most effective is when we put something physically out in the street to slow that traffic down. In addition to speeds, we also do focus a little bit on cut-through traffic, although we'll be very candid in telling you it's very difficult to change paths of travel for traffic. So if you've got a lot of traffic today, in most cases, our best hope is to slow that traffic down, not to divert them elsewhere. Because one problem with diverting it elsewhere is it ends up in somebody else's neighborhood potentially. So we try to be very cognizant of the fact that when we put these devices out, they have consequences. They will do a very good job at slowing down traffic, but we don't want to create other issues that are unintended elsewhere. That also comes into play when we're looking at different types of neighborhoods. Here in Haynes Manor, we're dealing with more of a suburban type of a land use. There aren't as many cut-through routes, and so we're not as worried about shifting travel patterns very much. So we do take that into consideration. Slide 4, just to let you know, I don't know if I should offer you congratulations or condolences for being welcomed into this program. It is a very popular offering of the Department of Transportation, and that's really not a good thing. That means that there are a lot of neighborhoods who are faced with this very same problem that you all have noticed. This slide is a little bit dated. I think we're well over 200 neighborhoods now who have applied into this program, and over 400 streets that we're collecting data and try to get some information on to make these prioritization decisions. Of course, we can't do traffic calming on every street that we would like to. It's a matter of budget and staff availability and time, and so we are selecting currently about 50 neighborhoods a year, 25 in 2 different windows that are opened twice a year. Your neighborhood happens to be one of those, and so that's a good thing. But it also says that some of the behavior that we noticed on some of the streets in your application did rise to a pretty high level that we agree with you that some attention is needed on these streets. How we prioritize these is shown in slide 5 here. There are really 4 different criteria. Crashes is the biggest one. We do look at, where did these crashes occur? That's one of our top priorities in the department. Also very close to that is measured speeds, and we know that those are not independent of each other. Where we have high speeds, we very often have high numbers of crashes and high severities of crashes. We look at things like how many of those crashes had injuries related to them and so forth, and all of that comes into our decision making. The active transportation has to do with sidewalks and bike lanes and those types of things. Very often what we find is when a neighborhood applies for traffic calming, yes, they want speeds lowered, but they often want speed lowered because they don't even feel like it's safe to walk along the road. And I don't doubt that there's some of that feeling here in this neighborhood. And so we prioritize you if you don't have things like sidewalks or bike lanes, because you don't have any other accommodation to make those trips. And then neighborhood destinations has to do with, are there attractive destinations that you might want to make that walking or biking trip to, like a school, park, a playground, a transit stop, those types of things. So when we roll in all of those factors together, we come out with a score. And again, the Haynes Manor neighborhood was in the upper tiers of that to get selected. The streets that are on the application that you all gave to us some months ago are these. They were Mormon's Arm Road, Revels Drive, Rowan Drive, and Buena Vista Pike. We're going to look at those here in just a second in a map way when we look at the actual recommendations. But that's what was given to us. A little bit about some of the tools that we use in this program. Keep in mind that some of these are probably applicable to you all and others are not. We deal with all of Davidson County, and so that's 550 square miles of land use, ranging from very, very rural to ultra urban, and so not all tools are applicable in all contexts. One of the main ones we really like to use, the jury's out a little bit about how effective it is just by itself, but when we know that when we can visually narrow the road, we're encouraging lower speeds. You guys have a little bit of a challenge in this respect. Your lots are a little bigger, your houses are set back a little further. Again, it's more of a suburban type of a context, and that's going to just naturally increase the likelihood that someone is going to speed. They can see better. It's not a very tight urban environment where a person can come walking out at any minute, and so you don't know what to expect. Here, you can pretty well see what's going on, and so when we can visually narrow the road, maybe by striping or some delineators or things, that often has some effect. Signage and markings, this can be one of those things that's a little bit of an educational component. If we can, visually tell someone, remind them how fast they are actually going, that sometimes will make a difference. Sometimes it won't. And so we're still experimenting with the placement of these signs and what our what our lower speeds that we're able to achieve have been in terms of results. So the jury's still out a little bit on those. Traffic circles are things, when we have very particular needs at intersections within neighborhoods. We've deployed some of these, and this we have to be very careful if we're dealing with WeGo routes, of which you have some in your neighborhood. School buses and things that might have trouble navigating these. They can create some issues there. Chicanes are a little bit more of a typically used in a more urban environment. They kind of create a meandering path for traffic as it tries to go, and sometimes even narrows the lane down to one lane, so that if two cars get there at the same time, one has to wait on the other. And then we get to kind of the main event, I guess, as it were. Probably 90% of the people when we go to meetings and talk about traffic calming, these next two devices are what they have in mind. These are speed tables and speed cushions, and this is really the only vertical measure that we use, something that you actually have to mount and go over. And because of that, we find them to be some of the most effective tools that we have. We know when we deploy these, traffic is going to slow down. There's no question about it. If you've driven over some of those, you know what I mean. They create if you hit them at higher speeds, it's very uncomfortable, and you certainly know that you've hit them. So the difference here is speed tables, you might note in these pictures, has a flat top. They're longer in the direction of the travel lane, and they have that flat top across it. And so what that does is it makes it a more gradual elevation. And so the difference there is that lets you traverse that device at a little bit higher speed than you would with this one, which is the speed cushion. We use speed cushions more often because we are dealing with residential local streets where we want traffic to be in that 15-mile-an-hour range as they hit these. The other component to this is how do we space them? We want to space them in such a way as that we get a sustained slower speed, not that you'll slow down to 15 miles an hour directly at that and then speed up to get to the next one. So our experience is if we can space those at 400 to 600 feet apart, we get a nice sustained slower speed through the neighborhood. I'm getting a little bit of feedback there. If you can mute, and I'm almost done. We're going to take questions here in just a second. The last thing I want to mention before we do that is some next steps to the program. So that was kind of an overview of some of the tools that we use, and how we deploy those in Nashville is through this process. So I'm going to share with you here in just a second a very preliminary design based on some information we've collected. We're going to share that with you. If we need to get back together after we hear your thoughts on that, we can do that in a second meeting. We don't always need to do that. But in any case, once we settle on what the neighborhood agrees is the right design for their streets, we do require a petition process. And as we mentioned, when we put these devices on some streets, they're there. They do make a difference. They will slow traffic down, and that's something that we want to be sure the residents have had an opportunity to learn about, to know what's coming, and give us feedback on that if they choose. And so we do require 70% approval of the homeowners on that street, approving that this is something that we're all in this together, and we do want this on our street. And then we move to the installation of that once we have that petition back. That petition is something that's driven by the neighborhood. We do not provide the manpower to go door to door and talk with the neighbors. We do leave that up to the neighborhood to do that. That in a nutshell is our program. Are there any questions about any of that? How we select it, or the tools we use, or the petition process, or anything that you'd like to ask about?
Hi, Jeff. This is Claudia. So yes, I do have a question. My question is about the speed cushions. My concern with the speed cushions is I live right here at the corner of Rowan and Crouch. And we have a big motorcycle presence in our neighborhood. And I'm concerned that the speed cushions would allow the motorcycles to ride in between the actual cushion. Do you have any data on that, how it affects motorcycles?
Well, I agree with you 100%, and yes, they will ride right in between them. The point about the reason why there are gaps in those that you see is really for emergency vehicles. They have a wider wheelbase, and we space those pads there so that fire trucks, ambulances, and those types of vehicles their impact on those is minimized as they try to get to an emergency scene. But you're absolutely correct. If there are motorcycles in this area, they will ride between those exactly the same way, and I would not expect them to be impacted by the speed cushions. Um, One of the things that we try to do is again with the spacing, a normal passenger car wheels, we space them so that you're going to hit them with one set of the other. You can put two wheels in that gap, but you can't put all four. And to do that, sometimes we have to use things like flexible delineators or things on the side to ensure that traffic is going to hit them. Occasionally, we don't normally have to do that, but I don't know of a way, if we're going to have those gaps at all in there, to make it such that a motorcycle would essentially be exempt. My colleague here, Chris, who's done a lot of these applications, may have some knowledge about a device that would help with that. But in my mind, nothing really jumps out at me right off the bat in terms of being able to mitigate that.
Yeah, and Jeff, just to add on that, by the way, I'm Chris Sandwith with NDOT. I'm here with Jeff, working with traffic calming, but there is one location where we put, Jeff mentioned a vertical delineator. It's just a post essentially in the center lane, where a center lane or a center line would typically be. But we have also gotten some negative comments from neighbors there with that post there as well. So that is one thing that we could do, but much like Jeff said, the gaps, unfortunately, a motorcycle could fit through that gap.
This is Ken. The streets that we're concerned about, for example, Mormon's Arm Road. Mormon's Arm could probably benefit from the speed tables, but streets like Rebels and Rowan, I think the cushions would be more beneficial to those. And like Claudia's saying, I can see the motorcycles just racing through those. But our purpose is to at least try to slow things down to a certain degree. Probably can't stop at 100%, but if we can make an impact, that would be great. So could we use a combination of both the speed tables and the cushions is what I'm asking.
Yeah, Ken, I think that's a great point, and I think that's a good segue to let's go to the last slide here, or last couple of slides, and talk about what we have looked at in terms of this neighborhood specifically. I think you're right on target with what we're thinking as well. So slide 16 is a complicated looking map, but sometimes I like to show this to let you know that when we look at what we think is the best solution for these neighborhoods, we're really not just throwing darts at a map. We're trying to determine why traffic is doing what it's doing and why is it affecting these streets in particular. And some of this is a little bit of a guess. It's just using our experience as traffic engineers to determine travel desire lines. In this case, I don't doubt at all that some of this traffic that's coming through, it probably has some origins in Metro Center. If you look at major employment bases like Metro Center, and then just think about the afternoon, leaving work from there and going to major destinations, which are like interstates and interchanges. The Metro Center to Clarksville Pike to Trinity Lane to Buena Vista, becomes kind of a desire line. You can go all the way up Clarksville Pike, but as we know, it's under construction right now. And so you guys may have seen even more cut through traffic since TDOT is doing that project than you had in the past. I don't know. It's a little bit of a hunch, but it would not surprise me. And so on this map, the blue lines, those blue arrows, kind of designate a desire line that we think traffic may be using. And it's cutting through from Buena Vista Pike over to Whites Creek Pike, because I think it likes to go up to the interchange there at Briley and onto the interstate at Whites Creek Pike. And so it's got two opportunities to cut across. It can cut across Mormon's Arm, or it can come on up a little further north and come right through your neighborhood. So I think that's why we're seeing some of this. There's a close-up shot on slide 17 of the streets that those streets that we believe are being affected by that type of a travel path. So a couple of things. Mormon's Arm Road is a collector street. If I were to take away that yellow highlighting, you would see that it's purple. Buena Vista Pike is also purple. That's also designated as a collector street. Those are classifications given to streets by the planning department. And as you all probably understand, they just have to do with there's more traffic on those streets. It's generally a higher speed street. It's kind of where we want traffic to be. As streets are organized into a hierarchy, the highest are the red ones. Whites Creek Pike is a red one. That's an arterial. That's the streets that have the most traffic and generally the highest speed. Collectors below that, and then everything else is considered a local street. Rowan, Revels, and Lane Drive, which are on here, are local streets. Mormons, Buena Vista, and Whites Creek are something higher than that. Typically, as a policy, and you'll find this in our traffic calming design guidelines, we typically only work with local streets. We don't work with collectors or arterials, but we do leave the door open in some cases to work with some select collectors, because we believe that they are a little more residential in nature. They don't perform a role of a collector as much as others. In some cases, some places define these as major collectors and minor collectors. We don't do that. Mormon's Arm Road kind of falls into that category of a minor collector, though. And so as we've looked at that and we look at the housing characteristics along it, we agree with you, Mr. Jones, that Mormon's Arm could really use some attention. It was the highest ranking street that you all requested in terms of that mix of crashes, speed, those types of things. So in the last slide in your packet, and I now have it on the screen, is our proposed traffic calming measure, looking at what we believe those desire lines are, the data that we have available. We believe this would give us the best shot of answering some of the issues that we have. And so I will kind of talk through this. First of all, we don't have any traffic calming recommended on Buena Vista Pike. We would consider that to be a major collector. It's signed at 40 miles an hour. We know it's going to be faster. There aren't nearly as many houses along it. It is a much longer street. It really performs the task of a collector. And so for those reasons, we do not intend to put any traffic calming, at least like what we've talked about here in the form of cushions and speed humps along Buena Vista Pike. Mormon's Arm is also a collector, but we see that one differently. And we, like you pointed out, Mr. Jones, we agree that probably would the speed table would be very fitting on those. And so if you see our little red squares down here, that indicates a symbol where we would anticipate putting a speed table. So we've got 6 of those along the length of Mormon's Arm from Buena Vista Pike to Whites Creek. We pull them back away from the intersections. We certainly pull them back away from driveways, and then we try to space those within those parameters such that we get a good, consistent lower speed. We rate those at somewhere 20 to 25 miles an hour. I believe the speed limit on Mormon's Arm is 35, and so we think that would be a good fit there. And then, as you also pointed out, along Rowan, we have a series of speed cushions, and that's where we would get lower speeds. You see the always stop signs there. Those do make a difference, and so we kind of organize the cushion placement around those always stops. And if we go back to our desire lines here, Rebels is also included in that. There's, we think the traffic that's coming from Buena Vista Pike on Rowan, it has to get to, or it's trying to get to Whites Creek Pike. I think it's doing that two ways. Rebels, which you all did include on your application, I certainly think that's part of it. But I would also consider putting one set of speed cushions on Lane Drive, because if our hunch is correct and traffic is cutting through to get to Whites Creek Pike and maybe eventually up to the interchange at Briley, I could see them using Lane Drive as well. You all would know that better than I do, whether that's a necessary thing or not. But for what it's worth, that's our proposal based on the information that we have, and we'd love to have your comments on that.
This is Ken Jones again. I like what you've got here, and I think you're correct. Putting one on Lane would be a great idea. My home is on Buena Vista Pike, near the corner of Rowan Drive. So I get traffic coming from Mormon's Arm Road, coming down the hill, and it's like they're taking off, coming down the hill. And by the time they get to my house and Rowan Drive, I mean they're at a good clip. Is there nothing? And I know this is an open road, and it's designed for more faster speed than say in our community. So if we wanted to put a light or something there to kind of impede that, I mean, would that come from another department or another area of the city?
It would come from our department. It would come from the Department of Transportation for sure. By light, I assume you mean like a traffic signal. There's a couple of different types of things that can be put there. A traffic light, red, green, yellow traffic light that we're familiar with, has to meet certain criteria. That's a federal mandate, that it has to meet certain traffic volume warrants. I doubt very seriously it does meet those. It's just not that much traffic coming out onto Rowan, and those have to be sustained throughout, the better part of the day. And so that's probably not something that would be applicable there. There's other kind of lights like a flashing yellow caution light. We typically reserve those for things, where we have high numbers of crashes, to bring attention to an acute safety thing. But typically, if it's just for speeds, we wouldn't put those. But certainly some of those others maybe something we could look at from a crash standpoint. Chris, did you want to offer anything there?
It's also something that we could look at with a speed feedback sign on Buena Vista. Now, as Jeff kind of mentioned earlier, it's one of those things that it's not intrusive. It's something that someone can ignore if they want to ignore it, but it should have an effect for someone if like you're saying, if it's a hill going down that they might be speeding up and not even realizing that they're speeding up, then it would be useful for that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
This is Joyce. I have a comment on Buena Vista.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
there is a proposed development going to come to on Buena Vista right before you get to Mormon's Arms, probably in the next year. Could we come back to traffic calming when that develops, because that's going to cause more traffic on Buena Vista? And they have already said that they have asked for a blinking light at Buena Vista and Stoker's Lane, which is the next street for Mormons on. So I'm hoping that that will help the situation. But if not, is there a possibility we can come back to traffic calming again?
I would say that's always a possibility. That these application windows come around every 6 months, and neighborhoods are always welcome to apply into that, and that would be the opportunity to come back and take a look at that if conditions change. I am familiar with that development project, and I would say, whatever the neighborhood feels about it, more neighbors, less neighbors, more traffic, less, whatever. The positive thing you can say about that is the more that these areas get built up, and what was woods and just vacant property now has houses on it, and more people coming in and out of Stoker's Lane and those types of things. Certainly to a point. That's going to put everyone on notice that this is a growing area, and I think you typically will see, lower speeds because of that. And so, it may work to be a good thing ultimately for the neighborhood, but you're right, it kind of remains to be seen. A flashing light, more traffic pulling in and out, will that slow traffic down? It's very, very possible. But I think that's the right approach is to see how some of these changes affect conditions in the neighborhood, and then revisit it. Take what we can do now based on the conditions that we know exist, and then keep our eye on that in the future.
And also, this is Ken again. I have taken consideration also that Buena Vista is also being used as an alternative route for people who usually travel on Clarksville Highway, because it's a mess coming down there. So people coming from Jolton and other areas from north of us probably think Buena Vista is a more desirable route to get to their workplace. So
is that because of the construction you're saying?
On Clarksville Pike.
Correct. Yeah.
It's probably, this is Oscar. I have to agree with you. I think it's probably both. I think it's probably because of the construction, but just in general, Clarksville Pike has always had more traffic. So I can see how Buena Vista Pike would be an alternative for a lot of people coming from like north.
Right.
Yeah. And I do have a question. I live on Rowan Drive, and not to take away from Buena Vista Pike, but I live on Rowan Drive, and I'm wondering, in addition to the speed cushions, are you also adding more speed signs? Because I've noticed that just the placement that we have now, first of all, we don't have enough signs, in my opinion, but also the placement of them is not very visible. Like, it's hard to see it, just because of the way that Rowan is kind of like a curvy road, and I feel like or I wonder if you would benefit from also having more speed signs added.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Oscar, and it's something we can certainly take a look at as part of this. Typically, the speed limit is posted, on either end as you enter the neighborhood. That may or may not be the case. I'm not that familiar with it, and then, like you're saying, they may be put around a curve or shielded by a tree or who knows what, and that's certainly something we can take a look at. The other thing that goes in as part of this is Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're still doing this, is the blue and white traffic calming sign that kind of designates this neighborhood as having received some traffic calming. That brings a little more attention to it. And then when we install these speed cushions, at the beginning of that, at least on the first one, there will be another sign that goes with that. It's a warning sign that says speed humps or something. Let me go back to this. It was back on slide 13. You can see it. We have a speed hump warning sign with a posted, that's an advisory speed limit. That's not a regulatory. They can't write you a ticket based on that, but it's a warning sign, yellow and black, 20 mile an hour speed that goes along with it. We put those right at the set of the first speed cushions that you encounter. And then that kind of sets the tone as you go through this neighborhood. You're going to see more of these. We don't sign every one of them typically, but
Mhm.
the first ones you encountered as you enter. So there is some additional signing that goes along with this as well. But just taking a look at the standard speed limits is absolutely something that we can do as part of it.
Okay.
This is Joyce again. On Rebels, I know we said from Whites Creek to Rowing, but extended further north from there, the people come down the hill on Rebels at a high rate of speed, and then they have to stop at Rowing, and then they pick up speed onto Whites Creek. A lot of times they don't even stop at Rowing, they just go right on through the stop sign. Is
Mhm.
it possible to get some signage on the other side of Rowing, even though it's not in the traffic calming section?
The signage we might can do just to let them know that that's coming up. Certainly something we can look at for that first set of speed cushions. You know, as you come south on Rebels, you're going to hit those just after you come through that stop sign. So that might be a good thing to do is to reinforce the signage there. But you're talking about even north of Rowan.
Right.
Yeah. It's something we can take a look at doing. We just have to give some thought as to what that messaging would be. One of the things about traffic calming that we really try not to do is we don't put these on something like a cul-de-sac, and you know that's probably apparent why. Although there are some long cul-de-sacs that have every bit of the speed problem that some of these streets have. But the philosophy there is, well, these are their own neighborhood. I mean, these are the people that live. This is not cut through traffic. This is not, you know, the fault of the network. It's the neighbors living there, and that's hard if you happen to be one of those and you're having to deal with that kind of behavior. But we can't put in a lot of countermeasures that, you know, where this behavior is kind of internal to the neighborhood itself. But as far as signing goes, and try to bring some awareness to those things, but certainly something we can look at.
Okay, thank you.
Let me ask a question, and to follow back on what Joyce is asking, looking at the proposed traffic calming measures you have here, the stop sign that you have on Rebels Drive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me see if this is what I'm thinking of here. Okay, to the left of that, going back toward Rebels, back into the neighborhood further,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is that part of the traffic calming area as well?
No.
No, we don't have anything north of Rowan Drive because there's really no, I don't think, and I may be wrong here, a connection that goes all the way over to Buena Vista Pike.
Okay, so we're primarily dealing with connectors.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's why we spend time looking at that. You know, what is traffic trying to do here? Why is it cutting through this neighborhood? If it's just people that live in the neighborhood that are driving too fast, you know, that's not what this program is for. It's trying to mitigate some of this where they're trying to get through Nashville and they're using your neighborhood to do it, and that's what we don't want happening.
Understand it.
Or if they do it, but slow down.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I do want to go back to, I think, I forgot who it was, but like somebody mentioned going back to or revisiting Buena Vista Pike. And I feel like since we already have this approval, it would be probably a good idea to go ahead and address that, right? And add at least a flashing light or something later on Buena Vista Pike and Mormon's Arm.
For and Rowan.
I thought it was
There's a light there.
Yeah, there's already a traffic signal at Buena Vista and Mormon's Arm.
So you're talking about at Rowan and Buena Vista?
No, I thought somebody mentioned people going really fast down Buena Vista.
Oh, yes, coming from Mormon's Arm, going towards Rowan.
That's true.
Right, and I think that it was mentioned that there's a development coming up.
That's
Right.
south of
South of
Morgan's
Lane, yeah.
Arm.
Yeah. So what I was saying is, not waiting, or I guess my opinion is not waiting for the development to come in, but to go ahead and address that by adding a flash.
The flashing light that's at the corner of, that's at the intersection of Stoker's Lane and Buena Vista Pike. That's a little south of this neighborhood, and that developer has been conditioned to do that as part of his development, and so we're going to let the developer do it. We don't want to spend public money on something that the developer is going to come in and have to do as part of his project. And so we're going to let that play out. I think that's probably right. That's about a year away. And so that part will be taken care of by the developer. And I think what Ken is talking about is a little further north of Morman's Arm. Once you come through that traffic signal headed north, he's seeing that higher speed as you get closer to Rowan Drive.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
That's true. Well, we thank you for meeting with us, and we'll probably have to meet again.
Okay. Well, I think what I hear are some fairly minor changes. Let me just see if I've got this. So we like the placement of the tables and the cushions on the streets that we've got them. In addition to these, what we had talked about was making sure the speed limit signs are both out there, and adequate in terms of the number of them, and also that they're visible. We talked about looking at something as you come down Revels a little bit north of Rowan in a place where we don't have any speed cushions proposed, but maybe there's some signage or some other awareness that can happen in that case, because you're seeing a lot of stop sign running at that always stop. And then the other one was the intersection of Rowan and Buena Vista Pike itself. And we know that we want to do calming as you turn into Rowan, but that really doesn't do anything to address speed along Buena Vista. That's probably the trickiest one, but it may be something that there's some signage or some awareness we can bring to that issue. I'm not as familiar, Ken, like you talked about going down a hill and kind of taking off there. I'm not as familiar as of the topography there, so that's something we'll take a look at and see if we can come up with any stripe. We're not going to put speed tables like we talked about or anything on Buena Vista, but maybe there's some signage or some a clever striping that we could come up with that might give a little aid there.
Great.
Well, that's
Okay,
terrific.
now,
Well, what? Go ahead.
I was going to ask: is there a timeline or are we under time restraints to get the survey done?
There are. I think we're fairly generous with that. What we'll do from this point is we'll make those changes. Some of these, I'll tell you about this figure that you're looking at. This figure is really to help us with that petition process. It's, sometimes there might be signage, for instance, the speed limit signs. That's just kind of part of what we do anyway. We're probably not going to show that on this figure necessarily, because this figure is intended as you go door to door talking to your neighbors. What we're asking for their buy-in on are these vertical measures. We're not asking them to comment on marking or signage or anything like that. That's not intrusive. That's not going to bother anybody, and we don't need their opinion on that. We do want their opinion on these vertical measures. So this document here, really kind of in its state, we can add those other things that we talked about onto it, but really we could begin the petition process with this document. And so what we will do here is we will develop that petition for you, and we will highlight the houses that are kind of fair game. We're not going to ask, for instance, people's opinion that live on Crouch, unless they're at the corner of Rowan and Crouch. What we're asking to sign are the people on Rowan Drive, the affected part of Revels Drive, the affected part of Lane Drive and Mormon's Arm. And so we'll provide that petition that has all those addresses spelled out, so that, you know, as people have that, they just sign for the property where they live. So we'll provide that to you. I don't know what we will need to do is we'll need to provide that to someone in the neighborhood that has been Miss Johnson, but if that needs to change, we certainly can do that. We don't care who the champion is that goes out and works this. Some neighborhoods split it up, and, you know, everybody takes their own part. So we'll leave that up to y'all, but I do need a contact for who we need to kind of work with at this point in getting that information.
Good evening.
How are you doing?
This is Councilwoman Toombs. If I can ask a quick question, I logged on very late. What are speed tables?
Councilwoman, are you able to see our screen, or do you?
Yes, I can see the picture. Yes.
Terrific. I'm going to back up a few slides here and show you a picture. So speed tables, the only difference between it and the traditional speed cushion is speed tables have a flat top. They're longer in the direction of travel and have a flat top. That just makes them a little more gradual, and so you can go over them at a higher speed.
Okay.
So we felt like that was a good use on Mormon's Arm, which is identified as a collector.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Appreciate you joining us this evening.
This is Joyce again. I think you can send those petitions on to Miss Johnson, and she would distribute them to the street captains on those particular streets.
Okay.
And make sure that we get those completed, get those signatures.
That sounds terrific. We'll just keep her on as our contact. She's been that to this point, and we will maintain that. Well, again, everybody, we're pushing 7 o'clock here. We don't want to keep you any longer than we have to. You know, we're always here. Feel free to reach out at any time and with any questions that you may have. But the next thing you will get, we'll work through Miss Johnson, but we'll send her this plan and those petitions. And then we'll talk more about, you know, if y'all want to do another meeting, we can do that. I'll probably put together, you know, a little more detailed plan that shows, you know, some of those striping and signing changes that we've got planned as part of this, and we'll go from there. And if we do need to do another meeting, we're happy to do that and kind of go back over that again. But y'all just ready to get to work and get those petitions done. The quicker that happens, the quicker we can get those deployed. Ken, you did have a question. I didn't answer it about the timetable. I said it was generous, but I didn't say what it was. I think it's I think it's 6 months actually right now. Chris, correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think we do I don't think we've kicked anybody out of this program. You know, heaven knows we can be slow ourselves, and we know this is a lot of work. You guys have a big neighborhood here, and so this is a lot of signatures and doors to knock on. But you know, at some point, if it becomes apparent that the neighborhood's just not going to follow through, we'll have another discussion. But I don't think we've done that to this point. So we try to give the time that you need.
Okay. So you'll include all the logistics on the information that you'll give Janice.
I will, yes, sir. And
Okay.
she'll have our contact, you know, anytime, you know, we're there anytime she needs to talk.
Fantastic. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate it very much. Appreciate your insights and feedback, and look forward to working with you on this. I hope we can bring some relief.
So do we.
Councilwoman Toombs, thanks again for joining us. Chris, thank you from MDOT, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.